Robert was a founder of one of the earliest, most successful educational game companies. I'm not going to give a long speech on that because partly it will be unveiled as he explains his process in developing games. But we will be recording this session, and you will get an email telling you where you can actually, again, see the slides and hear it, because he will move quickly through the presentation. But I think with that, Robert, I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you get started.
Great. Thanks, Sue. Okay, so I've got to press the next button. Okay, so before I tell you a little bit about who I am, I thought where and when has a lot more to do with kind of the evolution of what we're about to talk about. So for those of you who may kind of recognize this is 6th Avenue, looking right down to ground zero, and I lived on 9th Street and 6th Avenue right as this happened during 9/11. Anybody who's a political buff, literally walking down the street, there's an impromptu meeting here with, and if you're interested, I'll let you figure out who's there. Times of turmoil, basically, in the city. And that's when I took a step back and I became a full-time substitute algebra teacher at Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis in 46th and Broadway. They'd already had 2 teachers leave, and we just kind of jumped into this situation to try and kind of salvage the school year and teach algebra. After that experience, I co-founded the company Tabula Digita, where I wrote the Dimension series from concept to classroom implementation. So whatever kind of questions you have, from the implications of writing your story, but going through production, programming, art design, to marketing meetings, to classroom implementation, to sales, to venture capital. This was a very fascinating, interesting time, and I've seen the implications of the product design all the way through these various phases. So happy to answer questions. There's no question out of bounds, really. So the product, again, went through $6.5 million in sales. We were implemented in prominent school districts in New York City, Chicago, Florida, Texas, and had over 2 million games played. So again, just can answer questions from so many different angles if you have them, so don't be afraid to ask. Okay. Prior to all that, though, back in 1994, I'd written a children's series that had won Family PC's Top Product of the Year award, had been translated into 14 languages, and had won a Macromedia People's Choice Award. The dirty little secret, though, is I wasn't a writer. I wasn't a children's writer, but I knew a lot about interactive, and you're in a small business, things kind of happen, and you get your feet wet. Since then, though, I've worked on railroad simulations, dance and social clubbing scenes, in creative roles and project roles, more science fiction stuff. And the earliest stuff I did in my career was I created an interactive playbook for the University of Michigan basketball team in 1989. So I've even done sports work and programming. So again, don't be afraid to ask about anything. It's a broad kind of range of curriculum. So let's get down to it. Why is story so important? After all these years of doing stuff, it's bubbled to the top. And I may be preaching to the choir here, but I just want to cover it just to make sure we get it here. But one of the things that story does is that it moves the curriculum. It moves what kids see as the obstacle in their day when they walk into the classroom, or even see business people have signed on, that this is an obstacle. And we even use the word test, right? This is the obstacle. But what story allows us to do is move that obstacle over to the curriculum, or over to the tool side of the equation. Rather than seeing what we're teaching as an obstacle, it becomes a tool for us to get somewhere and to do stuff. Really cool, subtle change there psychologically. Difficulties, though, I've seen this oversimplified or taken for granted in a lot of educational or training games. And then there's even sometimes where, and I tend to talk a lot about math and science, which are analytical, and I guess even business can be analytical things that we're teaching. but you can sometimes make a puzzle game out of math and science, which is really just a horse of another color. It's still the same thought process, still feels like that obstacle. So it's not quite the right application that story can bring us. Characters provide role models for kids. It's unbelievable what happens when kids gravitate towards these games, because now there's role models that they don't really have at home. And it's a tool for psychological transference. You've got tons of emotional energy going on, and you can do some amazing things within a game if you can pace it correctly with different emotional parts of the story. And the last thing, and this is going to be the most critical thing, and if I can get you to remember one thing out of this whole presentation, it's this: the suspension of disbelief. This is so powerful, and I'm going to tell you why here in just a minute. But before I tell you, I'm going to ask you, number one, what do you think is the number one mistake of story in educational or business and training games? I'm going to take like 2 seconds to let you think about that. What do you believe? And you can type it in the chat window, because we can talk about it later and stuff like that. But if you had to peg what the number one mistake was, what would it be? All right, so I'm going to tell you what I think it is. I think we have a void of villains, and here's why. We talked about moving this obstacle, your curriculum, what you're teaching, this challenge, from obstacle or challenge to the tool side of the equation, right? The problem is when you psychologically move this amazingly difficult thing you're trying to teach over to a tool side, you need to replace it with something. You need to replace it with some other obstacle, but an obstacle worth the value of your tool. So in other words, why would I give you this amazingly cool jackhammer / concrete thingamabob, whatever, to do some construction thing, and then ask you to go tack up a little, tack up a picture on the wall with it? It doesn't fit. And here we are teaching math and science or amazing business concepts, whatever it is, really powerful stuff that gets us to understand amazing concepts. And more often than not, I'm finding out how many cups of flour it takes to fill, 5 ounces of something, right? There's an imbalance there. There's no urgency. There's no psychological energy of the villain that tells me what I'm learning here is really powerful and important. And so I have a little line there. How amazing is alchemy, right? Back in, hundreds of years ago when people don't know about chemistry, the science we have is just taken for granted, I think. So what ends up happening is, kids are seeking out zombie stories. The Hunger Games and Hogwarts, these are really sophisticated stories that have big villains in them, big moral discussions and things, and kids are flocking to that type of stuff. Even adults flock to it, right? We're all watching scenarios and things on TV and in movies, and there's villains there, right? There's a void, and I think that's the void in education because our tools are so powerful, they aren't being balanced by that. So if you think about it, even NASA and the space race needed a villain, right? We didn't go to the moon just because we wanted to. There was a race, man. We were fighting the Cold War. So, it comes down to it. Even NASA needs a villain. So the goal of what we want to go over today is to get to art, right? We want to go from just a game to something that's really got an artistic component to it. And why is that? Because art is not right or wrong. It's beautiful. It's got a perspective. It's consistent. It's a believable world. I put that picture, an impressionistic picture up there because it's not real. But because it's consistent and it's shading and there's something about it that's consistent, we will take the time to suspend our disbelief and look at it a little bit longer, right? And this is the key to what I want to talk about today, is the suspension of disbelief. Science fiction movies, action adventures, even love stories make us suspend our disbelief in so many different ways. Science fiction, it's obvious, right? Wormholes and and traveling way faster than the speed of light, right? All of us just throw out all our science backgrounds and, yep, okay, I'll believe that. You're watching Star Trek and Star Wars. There's tons of stuff we willfully suspend our disbelief about in science and chemistry and time travel, all this kind of stuff, right? Action-adventure is the same thing. And even love stories, we know we can fall in love at first sight, but over a 2-hour movie where maybe have children, grow up, go to different cities, the compression that is there that allows us to suspend our disbelief is insanely powerful. And why is this so important? Is because your students or your business associates, your clients, aren't suspending their disbelief. Every time, and I'll just use the classroom again here as my main example, kids are coming into your classroom with years of experiences and influences that have shaped them, and for whatever it is, they come to geometry or chemistry or algebra or history, anything, and for that period of time, they have a value system that says, it's not as important as 20 other things on my list right now. And especially in these teenage years and high school years, when your psychology is still in development, you're going all over the place. There's 100 things more important. And my question then is, if that's the worldview kids are bringing to the classroom, do you think it's easier to get them to change their belief? Because what we've done in many instances is say, well, if I can't beat him, I join him. I make this important to you by giving you a test, by giving you another obstacle, and I'm going to test you on this. And all of a sudden, it comes right up to it increases their level of participation, not because they're interested in the topic, but because they know they have to pass a test. So I think this is a real interesting key to creating more effective games, because it's much easier to suspend disbelief than it is to change it. You can't change someone's beliefs. It's a fool's errand, right? To convince someone that that this sales process is going to change their life, or chemistry is so important. You've really got to master this, right? You can't change someone's belief, but you can, and it's amazing. For a short period of time, 2 hours, an hour, whatever your duration of your game is going to be, you can get someone to totally suspend their disbelief. And if you add interactivity to it, amazing opportunity to work and get somebody to understand your perspective without having to fight through all the other psychological issues and problems that are there, that are stopping them from getting what you do. But here's the key to suspending disbelief, which is consistency. So, our goal here is to get to art. One of the steps to getting to art is being consistent. So, the moment there's a glaring error in your character design, your movie, your character jumps the shark. I love that phrase. We're going to go jump, so-and-so jumped the shark, and I don't watch that series anymore. I don't know what television, shows you guys are watching these days, but, you can turn on a series and something's just not right. You're not going to watch it. So there's like one glaring thing that can break your trance. You can go from being cool to really cheesy. All right, I'll say it because it's a pet peeve. I'm kind of watching this show called Helix that's on the Sci-Fi Channel because I'm looking into biology. And anyway, there's a few things that just bug me, and it's hard to keep going with it. So what I'm going to show you today is a framework. It's not meant to be gospel truth on anything, but it's pointing out how you can be consistent with developing your characters and story, and I'll show you this framework. So the 4 tools for consistency that I'm going to go over today is how do you make believable characters and have character dynamics. We're going to talk about the plot. I'm going to give you a new tool to talk about the content of your plot, which is a self-journey framework. We're going to talk about balancing the villain, so you have dynamic characters. And then last, because this is just, it's got to be consistent, it's got to be good, I'll give you a tool to do art direction, especially if you can't draw, or like myself, I'm colorblind and can't draw. So this is a really powerful tool. that I hope you can use. All right, so let's jump in. Here's the first tool that I used. It's to create a psychological model of personality. Again, the idea here is consistency. You want coherent characters, coherent dynamics, languages, windows, which are behaviors that give insight, and actions. So this is your choice. I'm going to show you what I use, but your choice. You could use the 7 intelligences, 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 archetypes. By the way, it's a really cool book, Awakening the Heroes Within, written by Pearson. There's a link there. You can get a free peek at some of the stuff there, or you can use the I Ching. All kinds of interesting frameworks. The reason I am going to show you Jung's typology and Kiersey's type and temperament are because they're practically industry standards, and I'll show you that in a minute. But don't do this now, but right when we get off, I want you to go to Kiersey.com and take their test. It'll give you a personality test, and there's tons of resources there, and I'm going to show you some of them here. So just a quick overview for those who haven't heard of this. Jung's typology it may be in more popular culture, is better known through the Myers-Briggs research. It's an industry standard. There's tons of books and references on this and mounds of research. So again, if you haven't heard of it, there's 16 personality types based on 4 different factors, introverted and extroverted, which isn't really talking about being shy or people-friendly. It's more of a thinking process. Intuitive or sensing, feeling and thinking, and perceiving and judging. So those are the 4 aspects of it. And what happens is, and when you go to the Kiersey site, you'll see these statistics, and I'm sure these are way outdated because this is some of the stuff I used a little while back. But you will see how the 16 types play out by population percentages, and they'll give you descriptions of all the different types. You can see how these 4 factors create different types of character models that you can use. You can go from everything from an archetype or, a supervisor to the inspector, the healer, an architect, a promoter, operator, all kinds of different characters. It's so meaty that you can jump into. And just to take 2 seconds here, look at the difference between supervisor and inspector. The supervisor is an ESTJ. They're extroverted, sensing, thinking, and judging, while as an inspector is introverted, sensing, thinking, and judging. There's just 1 letter difference. It's the process on how they think. Really interesting. An extroverted person who's probably getting their data from external sources makes sense that they're a supervisor. They're viewing outward and looking at situations and probably supervising people, collecting lots of data. The inspector, though, is introverted, and they're probably going in, their thought process is internal, it's logic, and they've become an inspector. They're looking at various facts and data sets and doing something very differently, but these people think very similarly and could make interesting partners, or they could be oppositions in your story design. So let's move on here. Like I said, there's mounds of research. This comes from cognitive profiles, but these are polar opposites, right? Thinking, sensing, and intuitive is an opposite on this scale from thinker and feeler. And this gives you a number of different ways. Like let's take another example. Let's take an example of a story that starts with something being stolen in a school. If you look at the upper right-hand corner, looking at someone who's sensing and feeling, let's say somebody who's sensing and feeling arrives on the scene and is the first to start to try and figure out what's going on, right? They've got a verbal process. They love to talk through things with friends, and they relate personally, and they relate to people well. This type of person who arrives on the scene might immediately start talking with other people. Who did this? Who's here? What are the rumors? What's been gone? Oh my gosh, tell me about this, right? They're a very verbal person and probably engaging lots of people. But let's go down to the other side, to the thinker-intuitive quadrant, where there's someone who's dealing with logic, or we could even look at the facts type person, right? They have a strong need to understand, and they're looking for patterns. So if this person is opposite of the other person at this scene, they might be very quiet. They might even try to be anonymous, like let no one know that they're investigating. Why? Because they're looking for patterns. They're looking for people who might be giving away that they're guilty or not. They might be looking for all kinds of clues, and so they're very quiet, and the thought process is going on inside their head, right? They're already looking for facts and data, and you could kind of describe that as, I don't want to disturb the crime scene, sort of an approach. So two very different approaches to the same scene. Now, if you wanted to build your scene, right, if you started with the logic person, now enters the emotional person, and they start talking with people. Well, are these two people working together, or is this a conflict? Now, I mean, imagine you're the logical person looking around for clues, and you don't want to give away that you know that you're in a position of authority, or you may have some information, and you're trying to figure this out. Like one of the best, ways to get people to confess stuff, right? You know something more than them. Well, what would happen if someone comes in all emotionally and starts talking and blabbing and asking about, I'm even using the word blabbing, right? You could have a conflict here about two different approaches to solving a problem. And neither are right or wrong, but in your story you can elevate the conflict between the two. You can create all kinds of opportunities for discussion, learning, and understanding, and teamwork. Anyway, really helpful system to go through here. And as you go from scene to scene and beat to beat, introduce other characters, you can just kind of bounce from quadrant to quadrant and imagine who is appearing on the scene next. Or if you're cutting to a different scene, you might go somewhere different, and all of a sudden there's a creative person there, and what are they talking about? Here on the Kierzy site, again, there's incredible amounts of data here that gives you linguistic definitions and gives you a lot of ways that you can categorize your characters, focus in on their dialogue. It's a great resource. And this great resource, there's a book called Please Understand Me that talks about communication styles and the way styles interact. So this is an amazing, amazing resource for you to help you refine your dialogue, your approaches to solutions, all different types of things. And not only is it helping you with story, but it's going to help you understand how your users are interacting with your story, right? If you have an emotional person playing a logic-based game, now you've got some tools to understand why and how they're differing. Or if your goal is to get emotional people to think logically, now you've got a tool to start to understand how you would design your game very differently than those towards a logic person. Okay, so if you're putting a curriculum together or you're working with students, some exercises you might be able to do is to take these character types and do an exercise where you imagine animal representations for each of these. You could use current cultural icons or superhero matches. Even go through television shows or Disney shows and find out the different character dynamics that are playing and see if you can put those character types together. One of the thoughts that came up while I was putting the presentation together is there tends to be a concept that once we are a typical character in our lives, we are that character. And Hollywood tends to do that, right? It's called typecasting, right? You know this character, and he does not change over time. At least his character doesn't change. There may be some morals, there may be some growth that changes over time. But one of those references I gave you, that book by Pearson, and looks at the archetypes, we actually over our life go through different archetypes. We express different archetypes, and we can become different characters. It's something interesting to talk about. And as I was writing this, I thought, what about a morphing animal? Can we change? How would you, become a different character in a different situation? It's a really interesting type of concept. And yet we're looking at kids who take on different avatars, play multiple video game characters in different places. It's a real interesting of a story idea there. All right, so the number 2 tool that we're going to talk about is what you can do with your plot. Now, if you're new to the story writing and things, a great book to look at is Joseph Campbell, who talks about the hero's journey. And it turns out that myths across the world have a lot of similarities in terms of the psychological progression of the hero. And I won't go into all of those, but that's something for your reference if you're kind of new to this area. But my personal note here in terms of education and some of the stuff we're doing and what I would urge you to look at, take a second look at, is there's actually a part in Joseph Campbell's structure called the refusal of the call. This is where the hero, the person that we all, think is going to be the savior of whatever's going on, there's actually a part where the hero refuses all these, directions and hints like, yes, you need to go, to the mountains and explore this, or you need to buy that football team and become the something, right? There's a point where the hero, the person, actually hesitates and refuses the call. And I don't see that enough in educational games or stories. In educational games, we usually plop the characters down, run the kids through it, and there's no back and forth. There's no psychology of this. There's no this key point of refusing the call. It even happens in Rocky. I think they could play it up a lot more in Rocky, or could have, but it even happens in Rocky. And if you really want to get into it, when you watch the movie Rocky, he even makes a really interesting bargain that he's really not kind of fighting the champion to win. But I'll let you go watch the movie again. You can pull it up on Netflix really easily. Watch the bargain he makes, that this guy who actually is over the hill, he's done with fighting. They've moved him out, right? What does he have to do to fight a champion, right? It's not that simple, and it's a great character to put together when you think about it. Okay, and technically, if you think about it, if you have to do something, if everything's always a yes, 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 and all the signs are pointing to this, it becomes more like predestination rather than free will and the choice you need to make. But here's the tool I want to give to you today to move from archetype and theory to personal. So here's the tool that is really exciting and has made a huge difference in my life and the way I see some of these things. It's going to be about your personal journey because, let's face it, we're all a microcosm of heroes, and especially if you're in education or training route, this is really tough stuff. So what I'm going to show you is this tool that takes into account your family constellation, 9 key events, and an obstacle analysis. So here's your hero's journey. The first thing you're going to do is take key events at the developmental stages of your life. Ages 3 to 8 is a key developmental stage. I want you to think of the memories that popped into your mind, the things that are just what are the most important things that happened to you from age 3 to 8? Those most powerful memories, the things are there. And you can write, 6 or 7 of them, how many they are, but just come up with the top 3. All right, I'll give you an example. When I was like 6 or 7, I played soccer really well. And I was in this game, I had already scored 3 goals, and they put me way back in the defense. And of course, if you know anything about soccer when you're only 6 or 7, it's just a ball of kids running around, right? But you don't know that then when you're 6 years old. So there I am back in the defense. I got the ball somehow, and I thought I was supposed to score. So I literally took the ball all the way from one end to the other and scored and was completely excited about what I'd done. But when I got to the sideline, because they took me out, I almost got scolded because I didn't, I felt like I did get scolded because I didn't pass the ball. And it stuck in my head. It was this weird thing that, wow, if I'm showing off or I'm doing skills, it's hurting other people that I'm supposed to be sharing, which sounds like a really good thing you want to teach kids. But at that age, it turned into a really weird situation where I felt like I was being punished for doing things, being very skillful, to being very good at something. And that can be very powerful. It is very powerful. So let's look at, so what I want you to do is then go from age 9 to 14, catalog 3 events, and then go from ages 15 to 19 and do the same thing, right? And You know, there's all kinds of examples. I'll give you another example. Age 15 to 19, I have a friend who's a really good singer, but at one point in his life, his mother said he was getting a lot of the roles. At one point, his mother said to him, hey, everybody's going to be jealous of you because you're always getting the lead roles. And it totally affected this guy because he doesn't want to, pursue his career as well as he should, because there's this weird psychological thing hanging in the background that says, if I do that, I'm going to lose friends. Okay? So now you're going to be going through these examples, just write them out as they come, and this is your own hero's journey. And as you do this, this gives you great material to sort of give depth to your characters and understand motivations as to why people do what they do, and to create something that's rich that kids can actually sink their teeth into while they're playing the game. Okay, so next in this process, you're going to take your family constellation. These are the key characters that influenced you in your hero's journey. Figure out or have your father take the personality type test, do it with your mother, and if they're not here, you're going to do an estimate, right? My father's not here, and my mom's still here, but technically not here. She's 93 and having some problems. But you basically can understand what their types are and then look at their dynamic. Also add in the fact that you have siblings and a birth order. And then what I want you to do as the last phase is do an obstacle synthesis. All right, go back to those 3 areas and tell yourself or define why are those so important, and here's the key, see how they've influenced you today. Are you doing what you should be doing? I mean, that's a key theme, right? There's a lot of people that wanted to be the singer, the actor, move to New York City or move to Oklahoma, but their father, had a very different way of looking at the world, right? Are you doing today what you should be doing, quote unquote, should? And if you are, does it resonate with any of those things that happened in the developmental stages of your life, right? Do you think you match your type? Are you doing what you're doing, but you should be doing something else? Or you think you would be much better at doing something else? Are you doing what you want to be doing? So there's a bunch of questions here that can help bring out in your obstacle analysis what are the obstacles in your life, what you're overcoming, and then relate them to your event into your hero's journey, right? And the reason I have you do this is because this is all material for you to draw on as backstory. When I wrote the algebra series Dimension, I started off by writing a full movie script that outlined all the characters, the intentions, the motivations, what was happening that was going to end up in the game that you would never have known about. I mean, you don't get the whole story when you play the game, but you get because you hit it in a period of time where all these characters have come together. But for me to understand how the characters there interact with each other, I had to know this whole backstory of the characters. Who's the main character? Why is she involved? What obstacles in her life make her react to another different character type? And why might she be hesitant to let this person on the team go further in the mission? Or why would she push that person to go further in the mission? Why doesn't she want to do that? And do you have characters that are helping each other get over obstacles or fears in the game in a role modeling standpoint? So what this hero's journey for you does, it gives you material to draw on. Because the truth is, when we write our first couple of games, I'm assuming, we're all not professional script writers here, that when we do write our first and second products, make our first games and products, we can't help it. Psychologically, you're going to be writing about yourself. So if you go through this process, you'll have a better insight into yourself. You'll have a better game that comes out. When you're a professional writer and you're writing day in, day out, you then have the ability to detach yourself and write character dynamics that have nothing to do with your own issues in life. Okay, perfect. We're on time here. We're 34 minutes in. Number 3. So the number 3 tool I want to give you is balancing the villain. So remember, I said the number 1 problem for educational games is that we don't balance all the stuff we're talking about teaching someone. If we have a main character that's some kind of great hero, or that our game says, oh, here's the, electron hero. He's going to do this and this and this in this little mini game, right? We're kind of like making it really silly. The gravity of chemistry, physics, math, history, this stuff is so powerful if you really understand it. And I'm going to, lean towards the math and science stuff right now, because that's like the worst case, right? That is so abstract that people don't normally get it and don't want to make it part of their lives, right? That if we don't have a main character and a dynamic character and a story that's really powerful, kids won't realize just how vital this is. And when you don't balance that villain with your character, now we're talking about balancing it. This is what happens, is that you end up with a game that's kind of silly or it's disproportionate, right? Now, don't get me wrong. Mini games, silly and fun stuff is great. It breaks the ice, and it's good. But if you're looking for longer-term effects, if you're looking at something that's more powerful, that gives someone a complexity of what's going on, you need to look at the characters you have in your game. Even if it's silly, your obstacles and the silliness of the opponent and the villain needs to be strong enough, right, to battle all the stuff you're doing. It's really hard when you're making something that's just silly. But again, look at some other games that aren't silly, that have a tremendous amount of work in the story, a tremendous amount of work in the technology, the 3D stuff that's going on, and you're like, really? The villain's gone. There's, who cares? I'm taking the temperature of the water, and if I don't do this, there's no consequences, right? There's some story, and it's not balanced by something that's really important. Kind of assumes it. Let me jump to this next slide right here first. We're talking about critical choices, right? When I said take the temperature of the water, what I meant was you're giving the player a decision. You're giving the player something in the story that if they do this or that, it's going to be really powerful, and that's the implication that, oh my God, I can actually figure out what's going on by taking the temperature of this, and wow, that is a really amazing thing that I was able to do, right? Whoops, I just clicked something, I think, here. I'm using my hands over here. So the key to making something a critical decision is this. A critical decision or a choice is defined by this. You have no choice to turn back. It's called the gap in decisions. A guy named Robert McKee. I learned this from Robert McKee years ago. He's got a book called Story Structure. I would highly recommend getting it, but I would even more recommend going to one of his seminars. It's just, the book is cool, but his seminars are amazing. Anyway, what he's talking about is this gap where once you're presented with a situation, you can't go back. So here's an example. Imagine you're in high school and you're going to a party, and it's kind of late at night. You're not sure, should I go home or not? You're kind of checking your curfew, this kind of thing. You can't find your friends, but the party's still rocking. You go upstairs, you open the door, and they're your best friends, and they're smoking marijuana. And they offer it to you for the first time. Now, you've opened the door, your friends are offering you marijuana, you now have a gap. You have to decide yes or no. If I decide yes, oh my gosh, it sends me down a whole new path of decisions that I'm going to have to confront. I can't tell my parents, right? There's something I'm not supposed to be doing that I can't tell my parents, so that takes my character decisions in a completely different way. I may be worried about other friends that will look at me in a different way. I might get a label as a stoner. Who knows? There's all kinds of things that happen if you say yes. If I say no, right, if I go, oh, no thanks, and back out of the room, like close the door, I'm in a really tough predicament, because now do I tell my parents, because they may smell it on my clothes? Will I be turning in my friends? Can my friends trust me anymore? This is what is meant by a critical choice, where you can't turn back. Just leaving the room and closing the door, life won't be the same anymore. You're going to see your friends, whether you said yes or no, and this is what moves story along, but it also moves your character along. Your character is got to make a decision right there and right then, and that is what defines character. And if you don't have scenes or choices that are critical enough, you're not defining critical character. You're defining mealy-mouth stuff. So, you know, again, if I'm going to take the temperature of something and I go, I'm going to quit the game right now, or I'm going to go over here and not take the temperature and it's no big deal, or if I don't, you know, okay, a couple of fish died. I didn't care, right? That's the difference. That's what is happening. That's where you can heighten the impact that your game is having by creating critical choices. Okay, so let me move back to this slide here, which I think many of you may have seen. It would be great if you type this in really quickly to tell me if you have heard of this, if you've heard of flow. This psychologist, Csikszentmihalyi, came up with this concept called flow. So if everybody, please, I can see it already. Will says, yeah, definitely, Jason, yes. I don't know if Will said it quite like that, but LaDonna says yes. Here's the thing. This is wrong. This is just so wrong, it's not even funny, okay? Yet, when we design educational games, this is what comes up so often as to what is going on with your game. Now, here's what happens. We normally take an educational game and we put it in a focus group, and the kids start playing the game, right? Now, if you see that the child is bored, what is the recommendation from the focus group or from the programmers or for, what are they calling it now, not artificial intelligence engines, adaptive learning engines. Oh, yeah, oh, man, I can't tell you how frustrating this is. So the adaptive learning expert, right, what are they going to say? Ooh, I might have just stepped on a bunch of toes. Okay, so what the adaptive learning expert says is, oh, this kid is bored. He doesn't have the skills to do what's going on, right? Well, the other kid at the other side of the room is having anxiety. And what's the adaptive learning expert then say? Oh, we just need to lower the challenge or provide other skills or move along this system such that every kid in the class has this glazed look over their face, or they're excited, whatever, and they're playing the game, and we can always adapt the skill or the challenge level to fit, right? So that's what your focus group comes back to you with. Why is this wrong? I'm going to give you 2 seconds to and type it in if you have any ideas as to why on earth you think this is the completely wrong approach to adaptive learning or what's happening while you're in a focus group. Because I promise you, when you make your product and you've got focus groups and management people looking at you and this whole flow thing comes up, right, you've got to be able to know what's critical here, what's right and what's wrong. And why the feedback from somebody who says, I'm bored, as opposed to somebody who's like, I can't handle the challenge. So I've given you a couple seconds. What is wrong here is what's missing is motivation. I guarantee you, if the game we talked about was that I mentioned, taking the temperature of the water and a couple fish die, right? You've immediately got a bunch of people who are bored, right? Because the lack of the villain, right? But if all of a sudden this is a Spider-Man game and you're taking the temperature of the water because, some spider colony is doing something, because kids have already emotionally attached to the Spider-Man franchise and your story is insanely cool, you are going to be on a completely different motivational graph or performance graph because kids are willing to go so much further to find the temperature of something if they know that Spider-Man and that spiders and that really cool stuff is going to be happening if they find out the temperature, right? So what happens here is your content, your art, your everything here, your story, your characters, what's really cool about your game is completely ignored, and everybody thinks, oh, just remediate or lower the skill and that everything will be fine. It is not fine, and even if you can get someone to keep playing your game because you lowered the skill or you lowered the anxiety or did something else and they played it, it didn't make the impact it would have if Spider-Man and the spiders and all this kind of cool stuff had been happening. You won't get persistence. You won't get, I'm telling you, that graph, it's at 45 degrees, the flow channel. Think of it if your flow channel is designed at 60 degrees, or at 80 degrees. This is a really super hard game, right? And it's super hard. But what are the motivational benefits around doing something that's super hard? All right? So that's what's missing. And whenever anybody brings up flow and talks about this, they are completely ignoring your content, your story, your artwork, your all that stuff that engages kids. And one more example I'll throw out. I'm a basketball coach. I've coached basketball, right? I've got kids that are performing a drill at the end of practice. They're all tired, right? So you could say they've got a lot of anxiety, right? It's a really hard drill. They're all tired. I'm doing it on purpose because they're tired because we need to get in shape. But they're not performing very well, right? You can't do this drill because you're tired. Well, somebody's going to tell me, oh, we've got to lower the skill level of the drill. I'm like, no, you don't, because you've got to do all this stuff. But if you look at the kids, they're performing this drill at a certain level, right? Some are giving up. Some are, have a lot of anxiety. Some people are just too tired, right? And if you just used flow to analyze that example, you'd tell somebody you've got to adjust the drill that you're doing. But I guarantee, but again, my goal of the drill is all kinds of other things, to practice really difficult stuff while you're tired, because that's what happens at the end of basketball games and football games and lacrosse, right? Those are the key moments. I guarantee you, if I opened up the door and LeBron James walked in, every kid would get up there and try 100 times harder to do the drill. They would all of a sudden have energy. They would be trying their hardest. They would be focusing, everything we talk about in the flow channel. And was that changing the challenge or moving the skill? No, it wasn't. It was changing motivation. It was changing, all I did was change the surroundings. So that's what we're talking about, and I will get off of that soapbox back onto a different one. Okay, so let's jump. Ooh, I've got a pet peeve here up in the upper right-hand corner, so I guess I'm not all the way off soapboxes. Let's talk about the fourth and final tool here. We've got another, 10 minutes to go, so perfect, we're on time. We're going to talk about art direction. So how do you do art direction when you can't draw and you're colorblind, like myself? Well, what I did here was I took some of the popular games, right, just off of Steam. I took some of the promotional banners that they have. And by the way, this technique I learned from a guy named Chris Klug way back at a GDC conference, so I just wanted to give thanks to him. You can see that down in the left-hand corner. What you do is you take a whole bunch of games that might be in your genre, or for this example, let's look at these. Can you tell what type of game is communicated by these banners? Right? If you look at War Game versus, so I've got two War Games on there, Counter-Strike and War Game. Those give you the feeling of two different games, completely different games. Right? War Game is high-level strategy, and it's all about the objects and the tools for war. Right? Counter-Strike looks like it's all about the people and the teamwork, and it looks gritty, and it looks close up. Right? Both in the War Game genre, very different. If you look at Skyrim and you look at Magic 2014, both sort of magical mystery adventure type games, again, completely different feelings that you get here. Skyrim is even done in black and white, or at least to me it looks black and white, right? Very distant, right? These mountains that are way off and a symbol, and wow, that's a journey that's out there. There's something mysterious. Holy cow! You know, I want to really explore that. Whereas Magic, it's more about the character. It's about the person, right? She's got goggles that look like the steampunk era and chainmail for it. You know, there's something interesting about that. But it's more about the people and interactions versus the journey, this huge journey. And I'm sure, and you know that in Skyrim you meet all kinds of characters and stuff. Yet somebody made the choice to create this huge, vast picture as opposed to a whole bunch of characters all up front, sort of like War Game meets Magic equals Skyrim, where let's just put all the characters on the screen, right? Somebody made a really interesting choice there. And if you look at the game Fract, right, you get the idea and the feeling that it's not about characters, that it's, you know, probably a puzzle game, and that's from the, you know, the font choice and the graphics. You know, there's no characters in that banner. It's obviously just a puzzle game. Now, here's my pet peeve way at the top, Trials Fusion. I mean, it's a totally fun game, looks cool and everything. But one thing you'll notice is that the games, all these other games that look really meaty and deep and identifiable have different color palettes than Trials Fusion. And if you look at Trials Fusion, it's got the color palette of an educational video game. Why? Because marketing, if you get into a marketing discussion and you're having people do focus groups, they're looking for the broadest impact, and what happens is they do a quick summary of everything that's out there in the educational world, and it ends up almost like eating their young. It proves that what's the most popular color for kids 9 to 15? Well, it's light blue. And what's the other color? Oh, it's light green. So everything in education, I won't guarantee, you go through, you're going to find light blue and light green interfaces and boards, and that is not taking you in any direction for story at all. It just really is not. It's not compelling. It's not balancing a villain. It doesn't get you to move through space. It's just the bland stuff that it's meant for websites and easy, non-intrusive stuff, and it's meant for getting a massive audience rather than a very engaged audience. And that, of course, is a problem if you're taking venture capital money, or if you have a product that needs sales. You're going to have people constantly telling you, no, we need much more, we need to appeal to everybody. And this is another problem you get into, especially with educational sales. You show your game. Like, for example, if you look at Counter-Strike, the first thing that's going to come back from your focus groups and everybody else is, that's a game for boys and girls don't play it. And we need it to look like Trials Fusion because we want girls. So just so you understand the impact here, and this is what you get by looking at other games. So now here's the technique. What you're going to do is create your own collage for your own game, just by going to Google Images and starting to type in things. I mean, if we, mystery movies, like we take that, here, I'll take my example here. So this is the storyboard, or technically it's called a mood board. This is the mood board I created for the series, the algebra series called Dimension. And I just went to Google Images, and I had some books around, and I was like, okay, I want this biological thing that's kind of half digital. There's some digital stuff going on, but, this is I want this to be a really tough adventure. There's just a lot of emotions going on. After 9/11 and after teaching algebra with kids who didn't have role models, that came in from the Bronx, that were having a really tough time, and there were tons of kids that weren't engaged in some really problematic situations, I could see the frustration and the grind that was going on. So I used darker colors and some just really powerful images that were there. And you can kind of play around and see what's there. But what I did was collected the images and made a collage. Then here's the technique. Once you have the basis for your collage and you still feel like you're building some more images to it, grab an image. When you grab an image, you'll kind of put it on screen. Now, does that fit? It doesn't fit. Does this fit? It's a little bright. Maybe if you made it less important, because it's not a puzzle game, but it's a small piece. So that's why I made small pieces of the math in there. Does Wargame fit? It's got some of that orange color, but no, I don't feel like it fits. Does Counter-Strike fit? I feel like it does. There's a lot of color there. I like the personal up-close battle and image. Of course, you wouldn't use that for an educational game, but you start to get a feeling for what your game is, what your genre is, and how to communicate this to your art team. Let me kind of go back here real quick. So this is a mood board. So when you do get an artist, so this is how you do the art direction. You're technically not the art director, but you're hiring one, or you're handing the project and your script off to somebody and go, okay, this is the game we're making. This is your first step. So when your art director is in with you, you go, this is what we're going for. This is the mood. This is what's going on. Take the Counter-Strike out of there. Right? This is what's happening. This is the mood. Now, this isn't their final actual art direction, but it's a mood board. It's designed to do what we just showed here, is that any time your artist comes up with some interesting pieces, is to put it against the mood board and see if it fits. And that's how you start to direct the art to create something that has a direction to it. I mean, think about the word art direction. It's not art everywhere like Trials Fusion. It's not like, hey, we're going to open this up and it'll be everything for everyone. It'll fit on any website and anybody will be able to play it at any time. And, we're going to throw in an adaptive learning engine to it so everybody will have the exact same great remedial experience, right? If you're building that, it should be green and blue, right? And that's impossible to do. But anyway, so here's the final cover for Dimension. We made, we had a passion to make a video game, so we actually made a box for it. And this was the final cover, a very up close. I mean, I didn't have Counter-Strike back then, but if you were to put Counter-Strike with this, absent the colors, you would feel a very close a closeness here to the topic, right? There's no buildings, there's no far out stuff. So this is our thing. So you can see digital, biological kind of stuff happening. Now, when you open our box, then the idea of opening this world of biology with biodigital stuff happening in a really weird space, when you open it, that opens and leads you to adventure, and that's where we put on a lot of the other characters and a lot of stuff there. So thank you. That is all the time I have for today. We've got, I guess, a half hour for questions, a bunch of stuff. So I'm finished, and there is some other material that you can dig in. Just to let you know, if you download this, there's some other questions and some interesting stuff back here that you can dig into later. But thanks for your time. I appreciate it, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And by the way, if you've got anything you want to talk about more in depth, my email's at the beginning of the presentation. Feel free to email me, and we'll go from there. Well, thank you, Joe. So if you have a question, I guess I'm not sure what's happened with our moderator groups, but if you have a question, I'll just go through some of these other slides if you want to hang on. If you have a question, I'll keep looking at the chat, but do me a favor, maybe type it in all caps, and then I know it's a question as opposed to maybe a comment to the rest of the group. Not that there's been a lot of comments flying. Okay. Let me jump on, I'll finish a few more slides if you want to hang on. So one of the questions, as you really dig down into the stuff that you're working on, is what's the most powerful emotion ever for anybody, right? And how would you use that in your game? And why is knowing what's the most powerful emotion? Hey, Sharon. Nice job, Sharon. Is why is knowing that so critical? And what tool did we discuss today that's relevant to this? So here's a question, and I'll leave that hanging out there. Do you have any suggestions for how to incorporate smaller, bite-sized piece of gaming content into more generic e-learning? Are there some baby steps you can talk about? Let's see. So, yeah. So this is the $1 billion question, right? Story creates a context. So if you're saying bite size, so two things. I would take the time to write enough backstory so that when you do make a bite-sized thing, that there's meat to it. Okay, so here would be the key: that even though your bite-sized learning is a short duration, it should inspire someone to learn more, right? So you're going to leave questions unanswered. You're going to say things interesting, like the absolute first line in Dimension. One of our characters says something, and she says to the other male character, let's see, what did she say? She says, I know things aren't right between us, but I just want you to be safe, or make sure you're going to be safe. That's all. It's just a small thing. They could have been friends. They could have, who knows? You don't know the backstory. What's there? But what happened was, when we were doing some of our testing, that's literally the first line in the game. Boom. A lot of the young girls perked their heads up and said, what's this going about? Or, what's happening here? So what you would do is use open-ended questions that create the need for kids to, or for your clients, whoever it is, to go dig more outside of your content, or to go out and dig more so they can come back to replay your content, even though it's minimal. One of the key things that happens in video games is that the video game is really hard, and kids will spend $19 or spend hours on forums and things to go find the secrets on how to do something. So that would be my quick idea there, is to make it complex enough that you can need to come back to get an extra skill that you've gone and learned on your own. The key there is inspiration. How do we get the deck? I think Sue will answer that question a lot better than I can right now.
We've got a technical problem. We're trying to figure it out.
Oh, okay.
But we will email everyone the complete deck. If you want to go ahead and finish talking with the deck, we'll record.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So yeah, short stories. Yeah, there's, minute mysteries. But again, if I were putting 2 cents in, the goal, if you only have a short period of time, is to make something so meaty that somebody wants more, and that they will go on their own. In other words, content outside of what you're doing to learn more, to come back to your mini game to do it even better. So an example might be Angry Birds. You can play it to a certain level to get success, but whoa, what if there was a control panel that allowed you to play with physics equations, right? But you didn't tell anybody how to use it, you didn't do anything. I would go on my own to go maybe find some equations, come in and play your game. So you didn't have to do more development, but there was something more there that made it really meaty and thick. So that's kind of what I would do there. Let's see. Many of your description explanations assume a third-person point of view. Okay, how does this work when the game is first-person and the player is a character? Well, you got a lot more writing to do, right? Because your first-person character has to actually make the choices. And if you're making key choices, you have a lot more writing and you have a lot more conditionals to do. Yeah, that was one of the kind of interesting things. in Dimension, you played a character. So the advantage of writing a story where you're suspending disbelief is the person is playing the character, so that you can talk to the character and you can kind of narrow some of those things down. So first person. So actually playing Dimension, it was a first person shooter. You were in that first person running around as that character. So and the player is the character. Yeah, so if you're in first person, you're talking to the dialogue. The person has to take over the role of the character.
Robert, do you have the slides again?
Do I have the slides are up for me? I don't know. Oh, am I able to move? You mean?
Yeah, they're okay now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was just trying to answer some of the questions. So Joe, if I answered that, okay, let me know if you got. I mean, that's a pretty cool question. Respond. Okay, good. Yeah, it's it's a challenge to get someone to take on that character, and I mean, it's a really actually when we're talking about suspension of disbelief, that's pretty amazing. So how would you get somebody to take on a character that they're not? Generally in video games, people have an affinity to a character that they like. So, so one example I've seen, done poorly, by the way, is that we sort of give people icons and say, choose your own icon, but then the game is the same. If you're making a game where it's first person, you might choose character roles where if let's go back to Kierzy, right? There are 4 main temperaments and there's 16 characters. If you had a huge budget, you might have 16 characters, but you probably wouldn't do that. Well, you could, yeah. You look at a lot of these games out there, like Riot games, and there's tons of characters you can play. What's the one by Riot Games called, right? You've got these mystical worlds where every character has some subtle change in what they do and who they are. I would look at Riot Games. League of Legends, thank you, Chris. Right, and what's the one on Steam? What's their game? Dota, D-O-T-A. Same thing, magical mystery worlds. But I kind of assume you guys don't have millions of dollars to create this amazing stuff. So what I would do is I would take 4 characters that represent the temperament types, and I would write the game from those perspectives or your scenes from those characters, and I would have someone choose that character that most closely resembles their type. And we're really getting into some really cool stuff about how to have a pre-test that would then understand a person's learning style, cognitive profile, and character type, and adjust the game and scenes accordingly. That would be amazing, amazing. And there's a company called Telltale Games. Telltale Games that has some cinematic things that do change based on the choices you make. Okay, so Sue, can you let me know how much time I have left here? Or I'm assuming I have about 20 minutes left for questions and...
Well, there's about 15 minutes left. People are starting to sign off. If you would like us to continue with questions, please put that into the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise
yeah, I think maybe we probably exhausted the initial questions. Again, I want to thank everyone for attending. Thank Robert for being such an energetic and stimulating spokesperson here on game design, and I welcome any of you to check out the website for Serious Play Conference, or let us know at the Serious Game Association. Join and tell us what we can do to help you with your careers. Thank you very much. We will post the recording, yes. You will get an email from